Okay, ladies and gentlemen, sample 3. This one brings it all together. Our first example was a direct variation. Our second example was a partial variation. In this one, we're going to see two different kind of relationships. One of them's partial, one of them's direct. Maybe I should say one of them's direct, one of them's partial. Anyway, it was about Penguin and Dalmatian banquet halls. Schools planning an awards banquet. The cost of renting the Penguin banquet hall and hiring serving staff is $675. That's sometimes called a flat rate. It doesn't matter how many people you have dinner for at this hall, they're going to charge you $675 off the top to rent the hall and to bring staff in. And then there's an additional cost of $12 per person. So the more people you have eating at this banquet, the more money it's going to cost you, but you're going to start at this amount and then you're going to add $12 per person. Whereas at Dalmatian, it's a little bit simpler. The hall and the meal all together to rent the space and to feed the people, $20 per person. So if we just, you might think, oh, well, this sounds a lot better because you're only paying per person, but look, the per person amount here is more than the per person amount there. So at some point, one of them is going to seem cheaper than the other, but it depends on, I guess, how many people you have. If you have a lot of people and you have to pay $20 per person, you might think, well, maybe I'm better off paying less per person and just taking the big hit off the top. And how many people that is, well, that's another interesting question. So first of all, in part A, we're supposed to identify all the numbers, all the charges as either fixed or variable costs. Well, the $675, that's a fixed cost. Okay, it doesn't change. It's always $675. Whereas the $12 per person, that's a variable cost. And you can tell because it says per person. So it varies. If you have 10 people, it's 12 times 10, $120. If you have 100 people, then it's going to be $1,200. So this is a variable cost. How about over here with Dalmatian? Well, it's $20 per person. Is that fixed or is that variable? I would definitely say that this is a variable cost. Okay, makes sense? Easy enough? Okay. Now, if we use the same lingo we were using before, this 675, the fixed cost, that's our initial amount. That's the part that doesn't change. That's the starting value. So B is equal to 675. Whereas the 12 over here, that's kind of like our rate of change. That's kind of like our M. M is equal to 12. Or over here, we could say that, we could say that M is equal to 20. By the way, what would the B, what would the initial amount, the starting value be for this question for Dalmatian? Well, the B in this case would be 0. There is no starting amount. You just pay a rate, a variable cost of 20 per person. You don't have anything to add to it. So when we build our equations, the way we build our equation is basically going to use these two numbers. The 12 is always going to get multiplied by the number of people. So if you have 10 people, you multiply 12 by 10. If you have X people, you're going to multiply 12 by X. So we want our equation to start off with equals 12 times X. And over here, we're going to be finding the cost. We'll make Y the cost for now. And, well, what are we forgetting? Well, we're forgetting the 675. Well, what do we do to that? Well, we add that to the amount per person. So we could say 675 over here. Or if we prefer, you could put the 675 first, and you could say 675 here plus 12 times X. What if you don't like X and Y? Well, you could make, instead of X, you'd make N the number of people. So 12 times N. Any way you slice it, the M, the rate, is the number you're going to multiply by a variable. This constant amount, or the fixed cost, is going to be all by itself. You're not multiplying it by anything. It's a constant value. And instead of Y, maybe you like the total cost. So we could say C for cost. And I think the question actually says write an equation to represent each relationship. I guess it would be the cost for the hull and the meal is 675 plus 12N. If I do the same thing over here, this time I'm just going to start with C for cost. Except that particular marker needs a break, so I'm going to let it take a break. And I'll write it in green anyways. We're going to say that the cost is actually just going to be 20 multiplied by whatever the variable is. So if my variable is going to be n, we'll say C is equal to 20 times n. And this equation looks a little bit like, where's my good marker? There we go. This equation is the cost for Dalmatian, and this equation, either one of them, is the cost for Penguin. You notice that this one has two parts, a variable part and a constant part. That makes it what kind of relationship? This would be a partial variation. And this one here just has C directly varying with n. So this is a direct variation. Okay. Actually going to label that on here. This is direct variation. And this is partial. Okay. And then in part C, we're supposed to be figuring out the cost for 500 people. So now that we have the equation, that's actually really easy to figure out. All we have to do is plug in 500 for the number of people. So C is going to be equal to 675 bucks plus 12 times, I'm going to plug in 500 here. All right. And time for our calculators. Take out your calculator, please. 675 plus 12 times 500. I get $6,675. Which means the 675 is the part for the haul, and the 6,000 is the part for the meals. So that's at Penguin dining hall. If we do the same thing for Dalmatian, we're just going to have a much simpler calculation. It's just going to be 20 times 500. Basically, take the formula, change the variable, substitute it with the number you want. In this case, you want 500 people. And so 20 times 500, well, 2 times 5 is 10, so I guess that's 10,000, right? $10,000. So what did we learn? Well, even though with Dalmatian, you only have to pay per person, because you're paying so much more per person, if you have a lot of people, it comes up to more money. It's actually cheaper to pay the $675 flat cost at Penguin, and you'll be paying just under $7,000 this way because the meals are much cheaper. The per person cost is cheaper. Of course, it'd be a different story if we had, let's say, 100 people going to this event. I'm not sure, 200 people would be an interesting one to see. At some point in between, you see it'll be about equal. But when you have a lot of people coming to your event, you're better off with Dalmatian because it's a direct relationship. If you were going to graph these two, I would expect this one to have a graph. I'll bet you can't see that. I would expect this one to have a graph that starts here at 0 and goes up $20 at a time, whereas this one is going to start a little higher at $675, but it's going to grow more slowly at only $12 per person. Still better off with this one if you go far enough out because it grows so slowly. Good question. I like it. I'd like you to try some homework questions. First of all, read the key concepts. It talks about the difference between direct and partial variation. Make sure that you understand the different parts. It also shows that the two different equations look like. And your homework questions, page 242, numbers 1 and 3, and page 250, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 8. Give that a try. If you don't understand anything, post a question on the Google Classroom, and I'll be happy to help out. I'll be logging on a couple times a day for the next week or so, and let me know if this was helpful to you. Okay? Bye-bye. Talk to you tomorrow.